Long before the glory of Babylon and the majesty of Assyria, there was Akkad, a civilization born in the heart of Mesopotamia, nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The Sumerians had already laid the foundations of city life and cuneiform writing, but it was the Akkadians, a Semitic-speaking people from the north, who would fuse that culture into something far greater. By 2350 BCE, a brilliant and ambitious man named Sargon rose from obscurity. Legend says he was found as a baby floating in a basket on the river, a story echoed in later traditions, and raised as a humble cupbearer to the king of Kish. But Sargon was no mere servant. He dreamed of uniting all the lands of Mesopotamia under a single crown. He seized the throne of Kish, marched south, and in a series of brilliant military campaigns, conquered city after city, Uruk, Ur, Lagash, and finally even the mighty Sumer. With sword and strategy, he carved out the first true empire in history, the Akkadian Empire. Sargon did more than conquer. He centralized the administration, placed loyal governors in key cities, and organized a vast network of trade that reached as far as the Indus Valley and Anatolia. Gold, tin, cedar, and lapis lazuli flowed through the empire's veins. But his most lasting contribution wasn't military or political. It was linguistic. The Akkadian language, written in adapted cuneiform, began to replace Sumerian as the lingua franca of the ancient Near East. Though Sumerian remained in sacred and scholarly use, Akkadian became the language of law, diplomacy, and empire. In temples and palaces, scribes etched royal decrees and divine hymns in this new Semitic tongue, ensuring that the legacy of Akkad would outlive its own borders. Akkadian was not just a tool of governance, it was a bridge between cultures. Its rise marked a turning point where Semitic peoples absorbed and preserved the knowledge of the Sumerians while forging their own identity. Sargon ruled for over 50 years. His empire stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. But no man lives forever, and as Sargon grew old, enemies stirred in the north. The foundations he built were strong, but would they hold? With Sargon's death, the empire passed into the hands of his sons. First Ramush, then Manishtushu, both capable leaders, though constantly tested by rebellion. Yet it was Sargon's grandson Naram-Sin who would elevate Akkad to its greatest glory. Naram-Sin ruled not as a mere king, but as king of the four quarters of the earth, and even more controversially, as god of Akkad. He was the first Mesopotamian ruler to deify himself during his lifetime, a radical move that shocked even his own people. But Naram-Sin believed his victories proved divine favor. He crushed a powerful coalition of mountain tribes known as the Lulubai. On a carved stone relief, the victory stele of Naram-Sin, he is shown towering above his enemies, helmet crowned with horns, a symbol of godhood, ascending a mountain as his enemies fall beneath him. It was more than propaganda, it was the declaration of a new age. Under Naram-Sin, Akkadian culture flourished. Cities grew into vibrant urban centers. Roads and irrigation canals were expanded, massive temple complexes were constructed, and regional rulers bowed before Akkad's might. The empire was no longer just a military machine, it was a center of art, theology, and scholarship. The Akkadian language matured into a rich literary vehicle. Epics, proverbs, legal codes, and diplomatic correspondence were written in Akkadian cuneiform. Scribes trained for years to master the thousands of wedge-shaped signs, preserving knowledge that would influence civilizations for millennia. In tablets found at Ebla, Mari, and even distant Elam, Akkadian was the common script. It became the world's first international language, used for treaties, royal letters, and trade. The fusion of Semitic speech and Sumerian script was a revolution in record-keeping, law, and literature. But no golden age lasts forever. Late in Naram-Sin's reign, omens began to trouble the temples. The gods, some said, were displeased with his arrogance. In a tale inscribed on clay, it said he destroyed the temple of Enlil at Nippur, a sacrilegious act that would bring about divine wrath. Whether true or not, the empire began to fracture. Revolts in distant provinces grew harder to suppress. Gutian raiders, fierce mountain people from the northeast, began to press into Akkadian lands. Crops failed. Trade slowed, and when Naram-Sin finally passed, he left behind a kingdom stretched thin and burdened with unrest. His son, Shar-Kali-Shari, would inherit the crown, but not the strength. The shadows of decline had already begun to fall across Akkad. Shar-Kali-Shari, son of the legendary Naram-Sin, ascended the throne during a time of mounting chaos. The majestic temples of Akkad still stood proudly, their ziggurats piercing the sky with ancient grandeur. But beneath this veneer of splendor, unrest simmered in distant provinces, whispering of rebellion and collapse. Hugh, the young king, knew that stability depended on his strength and cunning in these turbulent times. He launched relentless campaigns against the Gutians, fierce semi-nomadic tribes from the Zagros Mountains. The Gutians moved with speed and brutality, sacking outposts and destroying supply lines without mercy. Unlike the mighty Akkadian armies, they had no central command, no grand cities to defend. Their raids were storms, unpredictable, savage, and unstoppable by traditional warfare. Meanwhile, regional governors began to assert independence, itching for power as the empire frayed at the edges. Trade routes faltered, and caravans were ambushed in the desert sands, starving the heartland of its wealth. Fields lay untended, crops failed, and famine crept across the land like a silent specter. The proud empire's infrastructure buckled under the weight of ongoing warfare and deprivation. In the scribal schools of Akkad, students still learned the high language of diplomacy and law. Yet the true language of power was shifting from commands to negotiations, from laws to political bribes. The once unified realm fragmented into smaller territories, each ruled by local lords eager to survive. Shar-Kali-Shari's efforts to maintain unity only strained his resources further, draining his coffers and armies. As the years passed, the divine aura that once surrounded his ancestors seemed to fade from his visage. His counselors whispered fears of divine displeasure, suspecting the gods had turned their backs on Akkad. By his death around 2093 BCE, the empire was a shadow of its former self, riddled with civil wars and rival claimants. Records speak of a dozen kings fighting for dominance, each grasping for the remnants of an empire lost. This period, later called the Dark Age, saw proud city-states isolated or razed entirely. Climate studies reveal a devastating drought swept across Mesopotamia, compounding their woes. Crops failed, rivers shrank, and famine reduced populations, forcing many to migrate in despair. Even the mighty Euphrates, the lifeblood of the region, betrayed them, retreating into its bed. The once divine language of Akkad, carved into clay and stone, now told stories of divine wrath and royal downfall. The curse of Akkad, inscribed centuries later, mourned the fall. Where is the king who ruled the four quarters? By the early 22nd century BCE, the Gutians had overtaken much of lower Mesopotamia, claiming the land as their own. Akkad, the city of kings and the heart of civilization, vanished from history, its precise location forever lost. Yet even amidst this chaos and collapse, the language of Akkad refused to die, surviving in stories, legends, and fragments. The Akkadian Empire collapsed, but its language, and the memory of its greatness, endured. Though the Gutians ruled for a time, they lacked the sophisticated bureaucracy and urban culture of the Akkadians. Their dominance was short-lived, and within a century, a Sumerian renaissance arose from the ashes. The city of Ur, under the rule of Ur-Nammu, reclaimed much of Mesopotamia, ushering in the third dynasty of Ur. But even this Sumerian revival used Akkadian alongside Sumerian in inscriptions and diplomacy, proof of the language's lasting prestige. Over the next centuries, Akkadian evolved into two main dialects, Babylonian in the south and Assyrian in the north. These dialects became the official languages of two future empires, Babylon and Assyria, each inheriting and adapting Akkadian scripts, literature, religion, and ideology. In Babylon, scribes copied Akkadian versions of ancient myths, including the Epic of Gilgamesh, originally Sumerian, onto clay tablets. In Assyria, kings like Ashurbanipal collected libraries filled with Akkadian texts, including science, law, divination, and medicine. One such library, unearthed at Nineveh, contained over 30,000 cuneiform tablets, a testament to how deeply the language had taken root. Akkadian was used for over 2,500 years after the fall of Akkad. It became the lingua franca of the ancient Near East, used from Egypt to Anatolia, from Elam to Canaan. Treaties between kings, prayers to gods, royal decrees, and even international correspondence, like the Amarna letters between Egypt and Mesopotamia, were written in Akkadian. Its influence extended beyond language. The Akkadian concept of divine kingship, the use of monumental art for political messaging, and centralized record-keeping all shaped the cultures that followed. Even biblical texts written centuries later carry echoes of Mesopotamian myths recorded in Akkadian. By the time of the Persian Empire in the 6th century BCE, Akkadian began to fade, replaced by Aramaic. The last known Akkadian cuneiform tablet was written in the 1st century CE, over 2,000 years after Sargon's rise. And yet, the Akkadians were never truly forgotten. In modern times, archaeologists at sites like Tel Brak, Nippur, and Mari unearthed broken tablets and inscriptions, puzzle pieces of a lost world. Slowly, scholars began to decipher cuneiform, revealing royal edicts, medical recipes, flood myths, and celestial charts, all in Akkadian. Today, we do not know exactly where the capital city of Akkad stood. It has never been found, but we know its impact. The Akkadian Empire, the first of its kind, changed history. It proved that language, administration, and shared identity could bind vast, diverse lands. It proved that a language could outlive cities and kings. In the silence of ruined ziggurats and the brittle clay of cuneiform tablets, the Akkadians still speak, their voice echoing from the deep past, whispering the story of humanity's first empire.